Tough ripping, the most demanding track-type tractor application. Ripping puts your skills as an operator to the test. Tough ripping will increase the cost of owning and operating a track-type tractor. By using good ripping techniques, you can hold down that cost. You can increase production, maximize ripper tip life, reduce track wear, and prevent machine damage. This tape will show you some basic ripping techniques and discuss certain principles of ripping. It also explains terms that apply to ripping. It's a companion piece to the Caterpillar Handbook of Ripping. Learn this material and combine it with your experience and judgment to rip most effectively. Remember, every job is different. The process of ripping is as much an art as it is a science. If possible, review material characteristics such as weathering, laminations, and planes of weakness. This information will help you get the most out of your tractor, maximizing productivity at the lowest possible cost. Always remember to operate your machine safely. Perform a daily walk-around inspection and follow practices outlined in the Operation and Maintenance Manual. Before starting any work, understand the job requirements, your machine, and its capabilities. Make sure the machine, its attachments, cutting edges, and ripper tips have been properly maintained. Check tips frequently to make sure they're not broken or worn. When using Caterpillar penetration tips, always install the rib facing up. Also look for the word bottom engraved on the tip and install accordingly. While ripping, most of your attention will be focused on the ripper, but be aware of the entire job. Know what's going on around you. Always operate safely. Let's define some terms, and then we'll get to work. We'll be discussing the adjustable parallelogram ripper, which can be angled beyond vertical for improved penetration and then pitched forward for maximum ripping. All Caterpillar large track-type tractors use this style of ripper. They're available in single and multi-shank arrangements. This is the ripper shank that can be referred to as the ripper tooth. Caterpillar ripper shanks are one piece, which are stronger than welded ones and allow for better heel clearance. This is a replaceable ripper tip that is available in several different shapes and sizes. This is a replaceable shank protector. It's pinned to the leading edge of the shank, protecting it from wear. The structure that carries or holds the shank is called the carriage on a single shank ripper and the beam on a multi-shank ripper. The multi-shank beam can carry 1, 2, or 3 shanks. This is the ripper frame, sometimes referred to as the platform. The hydraulic lift cylinder raises and lowers the ripper. The pitch or tilt cylinders move the ripper shank forward and back. This is the optional hydraulic pin puller that allows you to change the length of the shank from the operator's compartment. The multi-shank ripper offers versatility and performance. It's intended as a high production ripper for use in hard-packed soils and for loosening embedded rock. It's intended for applications where a single shank ripper is required less than 20% of the time. It is not intended for high production when ripping rock. The more varied the job conditions, the more you should consider a multi-shank ripper. Use the single shank ripper for the toughest ripping in dense, tight, hard-to-rip materials. A single shank should be used in material which breaks out in large slabs, so that the slabs will either fracture or pass around the shank. Single and multi-shank rippers are also used in utility-type applications, such as aiding bulldozing, where large boulders are encountered in poorly shot material. Ripper productivity is a function of tractor weight and balance, as well as the composition and characteristics of the material being ripped. For maximum ripping efficiency, several techniques should be applied. Use the decelerator while ripping. It will let you match drawbar pull to available traction and ground conditions. Too much power while ripping can result in excessive track spin. To avoid track spin, reduce engine RPM. A constant, steady pull when ripping maximizes production and minimizes wear and tear on you and the machine. Proper use of the decelerator is one of the easiest ways to improve your ripping productivity. Another key factor in successful ripping is initial penetration. In most cases, start by angling the ripper shank well beyond the vertical position. In extremely hard-to-penetrate material, you may have to angle the shank back to its maximum position to get started. In easy-to-penetrate material, the angle may be just off vertical. In hard material, the rear of the tractor may be forced up slightly as the ripper tip contacts the surface and penetration begins. This is normal, but if the tip does not penetrate, try something else to prevent rapid tip wear and frustration. Raise the shank high enough to set the tracks flat on the ground. Try ripping a different direction and look for fractures, voids, and other breaks in the material. Once penetration is achieved, the correct shank angle must be maintained during the pass to get maximum ripper production. Move the tip forward until the tractor feels pulled into or pinned to the ground. Use the ripper tilt cylinder rod as a gauge to maintain the best ripping angle. Note how much rod is exposed when the tractor is ripping well, and use it as a reference for other passes in the same material. A shank angle that appears too far forward can actually be the best ripping angle. The tip should be slightly below the heel of the shank. In this position, the force exerted on the tip initially fractures and weakens the material. Then as the shank moves through, the material shatters from the bottom up. The most common error operators make while ripping is leaving the shank too far back. You want the tip to move through the material, not drag across it. Move the shank forward so the ripper tip does the ripping and self-sharpens as it moves through the material. This adjustment keeps the rear of the tractor on the ground and helps reduce wear on the shank and the face of the tip. Here's a hint for breaking hard spots. Use a combination of drawbar power and hydraulic force to do the work. Use the decelerator to control track slip. Then adjust the shank angle back slightly. Maintain a high enough engine speed to keep the tractor moving forward as the shank angles back. While the tractor moves forward, return the shank to its original position so you combine drawbar power and hydraulic force to shatter the rock. Keep the frame parallel to the material for best ripping. This position distributes the weight of the tractor evenly. Always adjust the shank length to keep the ripper frame parallel to the ground. When you're ripping, just rip. It's not practical to doze and rip at the same time, and do either efficiently. Use the blade to help protect the tractor while you're ripping. Carry the blade low enough to remove obstructions, but high enough to allow smaller fragments to pass underneath. First gear is generally the best gear for ripping. Speeds of 1 to 1.5 miles per hour, with about 2/3 throttle, produces the best results. Just a small increase above the recommended speed can result in accelerated tip wear and increase operating costs. Too much speed in tough conditions can also break the shank. If the material is easy to rip, go deeper rather than faster. Remember, rip slow and steady. It's the most effective technique, plus it's easier on you and the machine. Each area you rip has different characteristics, so you have to combine the basic techniques with your experience and common sense. These guidelines will help you get the job done. The first pass is usually the hardest because there aren't any voids for displaced material to move into. After the initial pass is made and full penetration is obtained, pass spacing of 1/2 the tractor width is recommended, but will vary according to the type of material and desired end use. Put gravity to work for you. Rip downhill whenever the job layout and the laminations of the material permit. If the laminations incline upward toward the surface, it's best to rip from the shallow end toward the deep end. This will help keep the tip in the ground. Rip from the deep end to the shallow end of the lamination, and the tip is likely to ride over it and be forced out of the ground. If this situation is encountered, the best solution would be to rip uphill. Another common sense guideline is not to turn the tractor while the ripper's in the ground. If the tractor is being steered by the ripper, attempting to straighten the tractor can break the shank. Backing up with the shank in the ground can cause tip retention problems. So before turning or backing up, look around and lift the ripper out of the ground. Having the right ripping tip for the job is another critical aspect of successful ripping. Tips come in various sizes and shapes, each suited for a certain application. Caterpillar makes centerline tips and penetration tips. Use centerline in abrasive condition where penetration is not a problem. Use penetration tips in material that is compact, dense, and hard to penetrate. Both centerline and penetration tips come in 3 lengths: short, intermediate, and long. The long tip is designed for low impact, highly abrasive conditions. They have the most wear material. Short tips are designed to be used in extreme impact conditions. Caterpillar also makes a ripper tip coated with an abrasion-resistant material, referred to as an ARM tip. These tips stay sharper longer, last longer, and maintain maximum productivity. No matter what kind of tip you choose, always use the longest tip that will rip without excessive breakage. In difficult-to-penetrate materials, when the tip becomes blunt, change it, even if there's plenty of wear material left. A blunt tip won't penetrate, and production suffers. Ripping demands the most from you and the tractor. Use the correct tip for the kind of material you're ripping. Use the decelerator for smooth, steady ripping. Operate in first gear. Position the ripper properly for good penetration. Move the ripper shank during the ripping pass so that the tip maintains maximum productivity. Try to rip downhill when possible and keep the ripper frame parallel to the ground. Use your best judgment and modify your ripping techniques to be the most productive. Work safe, work smart, and get the most from your Caterpillar tractor.